Welcome, everybody, to a very special episode of the Curated Culture. As you can see, I am joined by a very special guest, Mr. Shawn Humphrey. Shawn, how are we doing today?
Doing great. Thank you, Rob.
Good, man. Good. First and foremost, I want to thank you for being on. Thank you for
Oh,
joining me.
thanks for the invite. I really appreciate being on your show.
So the first thing that I want to ask is, we're in the middle of a pandemic, of course, and life as we know it is kind of thrown off the wheels, so to speak. How has the coronavirus impacted your everyday life?
Well, I work for a major bank right now. I'm a writer by trade, so
Okay.
they invited me to work as a contractor for them, and I was working on site here in Phoenix, Arizona. So I was doing that, and like a lot of people in my profession, I was given the opportunity to work full time from home. So I've been doing that. And it's a good thing I'm a bit of a hermit because I'm probably coping better than a lot of people, I would imagine.
Definitely. The introverts are definitely thriving right now.
Yeah, we're doing good.
Yeah, for sure. So give us a little bit about your background. I was doing a little research and I saw that you worked for the NIAID for a little while.
NIAID, yes, sir.
Yeah.
In 2005, I graduated from the University of Michigan with an English degree and was looking for work. I looked all over the country and I hired in for the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases as at the time I was a technical writer. I moved on to doing some web development and then I became their social media guy, their guru on that. And then I moved to the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Disease. I may have actually said that wrong. It's a really complicated name. NIDDK.
Yeah.
I think I was right. But
it's all right to use the acronyms. That's fine. People can
Oh
Google
yeah.
what they mean.
Well, the alphabet soup thing in Washington is that's just how you survive, really. But both of these are institutes under the National Institutes of Health,
Okay.
and they do to differentiate them from CDC. Like CDC, they're the ones who would go out. So we're the ones who would pay, who would help fund research through universities and do our own research as well on campus and through scientists, federal scientists. So we do research on disease, infectious disease. For NIAID would have been HIV/AIDS, TB, malaria, the flu, Ebola, everything that grabs a headline, including COVID-19.
Mhm.
And then the CDC is a little different, and they do research as well, but their focus is more on getting, I would say, getting treatment out to the people would be the better way to put it. So they'd be the boots on the ground in Sierra Leone or in Liberia when the Ebola outbreak began a few years ago. And I was there during a lot of those outbreaks, during the SARS outbreaks, the outbreak, the Ebola outbreak, Zika. And I left NIAID in 2016, and I left NIDDK in 2017 to go into the private sector, to work for the private sector.
So. Okay. All right. And so if you started back in, what would you say, 2005,
yeah,
that means you were there for a couple different administrations, and
yes.
We won't go too far down the political wormhole here, but I would imagine you've seen stark differences in how in '05 the Bush administration was still there, and then into the Obama administration, and now we're in the Trump administration. How would you say that the differences between internally how those administrations handled, because we were exposed to a couple of outbreaks back then too, versus how the Trump administration has handled COVID so far?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to emphasize that I'm no longer with them. I'm not speaking for them. I'm speaking just my own personal opinion.
Absolutely.
And I would say, first of all, I was hired in under the Bush administration during a time when, to give credit to the Bush administration, they wanted to fund more efforts to cure specifically HIV, malaria, and TB. So there was a big funding push at that time to work on those particular areas. And of course, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not science was taken seriously or was not taken seriously by the Bush administration. And then later, we moved into the Obama administration. During the Obama administration, one of the challenges that we met was, of course, 2013. Yeah, I think it was 2013 and 2012 maybe. We had the federal employees were I'm blanking on the word here. We were defunded. So
Okay.
yeah, basically everybody was told to go home unless you're an essential worker. So that was a frustration. So, you know, politics feeds into a lot of decision making in these situations. I would say that NIAID is the second best funded institute at NIH. I think they were very effective at crossing bridges and making, you know, being respected. Their leadership was respected by Republicans and Democrats alike in their
Okay.
mission and what they're trying to accomplish. I left service in 2017, and I'll be honest, I had a lot of issue with attacks on science from what I saw. And of course, I could no longer speak about anything going on post when I worked there in 2017, but I can say
Right.
that, you know, I wasn't pleased to be there anymore. You know, I think going into the private sector was the right move for me.
Sure.
And I want to also say that I have a great deal of respect for my colleagues who've chosen to stay on, who focused on the mission and are trying to get the word out to people. But from what I'm witnessing on the outside, just looking at what I see there, it does seem like, you know, it seems like the Trump administration was very wise to early on bring in Dr. Anthony Fauci to speak on the science, and would have been wiser still to stop contradicting the foremost expert on infectious diseases with one's pet theories that just don't make any sense. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
This is an open format here, man. Speak
Yeah.
your mind.
Right.
And we know that, you know, it's since you're no longer there, you can't really speak for them. So
I know.
yeah,
And I'm also not a doctor, so
right.
So I'll say that too.
You're not a doctor, but you have enough experience, better than most of us who spend hours arguing on Facebook with some dude that we went to high school with. So
I've had those arguments, yeah.
yeah.
And even after I tell them where I worked, they go, "Oh, you worked there? You met Dr. Fauci?" Well, I don't buy it. I'm just
Right.
like, well,
Which is
well,
that's
okay.
so weird. Why
Yeah.
do you think personally? Why do you think that is? Even though now we live in an age where information is so much more readily available than ever before, but people are still, I guess, they're hesitant to read into the science or read into the facts or believe the facts, despite evidence being around them so readily.
Yeah, science by nature is the kind of discipline that says everything that I have to say now is true now, but later on we may have to amend things. Like I remember early on, Dr. Fauci and the CDC were recommending against people wearing masks, not because they didn't want people to protect themselves, but because in the early days there weren't a lot of cases and there weren't a lot of masks.
Right.
And so the focus was, hey, you know, we want to make sure that the frontline people have access to that. And then as things changed, as new information came in, they changed and that has been a point that people have attacked Dr. Fauci on. And I don't think that's not fair. I mean, when you change policy on the basis of the information that you have, the best possible information that you have at the time. So I think, you know, it's very tempting to look at the ties between, you know, to look at different ties between people and different organizations and things, and to construct a narrative that gives you some comfort. Like, you know, hey, I'm a researcher. I'm picturing Ralph Wiggum on his Coleco. I'm a researcher. But, you know, I mean, everybody has access to information at this point. And while we don't have access to all the information, we have access to a lot of information. And when you don't know how to distinguish between authoritative voices, sources that are subject matter experts, people who know what they're talking about, and then somebody who's done their research and they've come up with a theory as to what's going on, you know, it's much easier to just say, well, I don't trust the government, I don't trust big corporations, therefore, because I don't trust them, anything that I have coming in, it's not going through a filter, and I'm not, you know, I'm going to accept anything that I'm told about them. You know, I've even had people say, well, that makes a lot of sense, but I still believe what I believe. And it's like, well, you're believing what you believe is a faith. That's not science, you know?
Right.
You know, faith has its place.
Exactly. And with how, you know, widespread COVID has become, and how, you know, fatal the virus itself has been, how, and again, personally, how dangerous do you think that sort of rhetoric can be?
Conspiracy theories are extremely dangerous. I remember seeing the impact when I was working at NIAID of conspiracy theories regarding polio.
Hmm.
There were, people who were saying in northern Nigeria, there were imams who were saying, if you get the polio vaccine, that's the West actually poisoning you. You shouldn't take it. And then we saw, we had almost eliminated polio in the wild, actually, but
Hmm.
then it came roaring back because people weren't immunizing. And then, of course, there was conspiracy theories regarding vaccines and autism. There's conspiracy theories regarding HIV in Southern Africa. Well,
Hmm.
there was the Dr. Beetroot. She was the she was a South African health authority who was saying, well, just eat fresh vegetables and you'll defeat HIV.
Right.
So, and then we saw a whole generation of people die, and their parents ended up having to raise children. It's just conspiracy theories affect everyone, and everyone is susceptible to it. It's very easy to want to believe something clear cut, that says this is what's happening. Here are the facts to back it. But those facts are always presented. They're cherry picked. They're chosen without, if there's something that argues against that point, that's going to be discredited. That's going to be discarded, and with a focus on proving your point, on proving your theory. And with the scientific method, you're trying to find information that proves the theory, but if you find information or facts that disprove the theory, then you have to discard the theory. You have to move on to something else,
Right. Right.
You can't have an attachment to a desire for an outcome.
Yeah, and in my experience personally, I ran into probably some of the more harsh conspiracy theorists a little while ago. I did a YouTube video, basically just trying to debunk the myth that coronavirus and the impending release of 5G were somehow correlated. There were
I
people
haven't
who
even read
believe
that
that.
one, and yeah,
Oh my goodness, yeah, that
I can't.
was one of the biggest ones. And
I
it
just
was
can't.
probably one of my more popular videos, and I have been being
Okay,
called an
I'll
idiot
watch it.
for I've been being called an idiot for about 2 months now because
Mm.
people still believe it. But and I won't say I did a dissertation and researched it heavily, but I did look into it, and a lot of the studies that I found that correlated 5G with coronavirus presented very faulty evidence, and mainly used emotion as the
Mm.
basis of their argument. And I think that
Okay.
is a lot of times why it's so easy for people to buy into conspiracy theories. It's not necessarily relying heavily on science and fact and evidence, rather emotional. What's the word I'm looking for? It's almost like emotional terrorism when you think about it. Like people just bomb you with how things make you feel, and I find that that's very prevalent today.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
With the 5G, you said you talked about studies just now. I mean, were there actual clinical studies that people conducted regarding a potential connection, and were
Yes.
these peer reviewed and published in scientific journals?
The ones that I found that did successfully, or at least in my mind, successfully debunked, were peer reviewed. They were published.
The
I
debunked
linked.
ones, debunking.
Yes.
Okay, yeah,
Yep, the
okay,
debunked ones, the ones that were saying that 5G was in correlation with causing coronavirus, or could be a cause for immunodeficiency, basically, were not peer reviewed. They were not published in any scientific journals or anything.
okay.
It was basically studies with links to
Hmm.
interviews from doctors, and that was it.
YouTubes.
Yeah.
The YouTubes.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
YouTube
Exactly.
doctors.
Yeah,
You know,
man.
uh,
It's
we had a guy come out early on with this who was talking about a lot of information and talking about a lot of his theories, and he did not say his credentials, and he did not say where he was from or what he did. He was a chiropractor.
mhm,
And I don't disrespect chiropractors as a profession. I mean, I understand that there's some physical therapy that can be useful with chiropractors, but I mean, you're not an infectious disease expert.
right.
You're not an immunologist. You're not a virologist. Just don't come at me with this and not say your credentials.
Right.
So
Eh,
yeah.
I think that's what we're running into a lot. And during, just to rewind just a bit, your
Mhm.
time with the NIDDK, you were in charge of communications, correct?
Well, I worked in an area of communications, and I wasn't in
Okay.
charge. I was actually working under somebody. I mean, I had my own beat. I focused on obesity and nutrition.
Right on. Okay.
So,
How did you find yourself having to, whenever you needed to publish something or whenever you needed to relay information to the public, um, how important was it for you to vet the information or vet sources or vet the studies that you came across during that time?
so I've complained a little bit about the administration. I got to say that the administration never, at the time that I was working there, never was. I never felt like there was like there was any kind of pressure coming from them to alter our information or change the science. I was mostly frustrated with things that I was seeing at the EPA and that sort of thing.
Right.
So I just want to point that out. I left more or less disgruntled with their approach to science overall, not because of anything that happened in my department or anything like that.
Okay.
In terms of like vetting and sharing information, that was absolutely required. It had to happen. Um, we, I, a lot of what I would do would be and this wasn't the only thing I do, because I developed I developed some papers and materials and speaking materials for scientists who go out. Um, so there's a show called Adam Ruins Everything. I just like to give this as an example. Adam Ruins
I love that
Everything.
show.
Yeah, it's a great show, right? I love it. So there was a show actually on weight loss, and they talked about something called The Biggest Loser, which was a game, like not a game show, but like a
It's like a reality show.
yeah, a reality show. And they talked about The Biggest Loser specifically because one of our scientists at the NIDDK had done a study about The Biggest Loser
Mhm.
contestants and how they had been impacted over the years. Did they keep the weight off, or did they put it back on? And they all gained it back, except for like maybe one person, I think. So they were talking about these fad and crash diets and how effective they are and what they do. And they sent the script over, and one of my jobs was to review it for accuracy and also to check it with the scientist who they brought on as a guest to review it for accuracy and make sure that the wording was correct. Because if you misword something, it could give a false indicator of a separate meaning. So
Okay.
that was, that I would say that was the kind of level of detail that we took in what we did, and I'm pretty proud of that work.
Good, good. And so now you're in the private sector and
Hmm.
you're doing your writing thing. How have you been keeping busy during the pandemic?
Yeah, this has been a good opportunity for me to focus on, outside of work hours, work on my novels. I'm a novelist.
Okay.
I've written, well, we'll say 3 novels, but one was completed. I went through the whole process. I sent it off to agents and got a lot of responses that gave me the feeling that maybe this first novel wasn't going to be the one, and go back to it. So
Uh-huh.
I focused on 2 other ideas, one of which I finished the first draft of. It's with an editor
Mhm.
that I've hired privately to go through it. And she's on chapter 13 out of chapter 20, if that helps.
Okay.
Her name's Heather Whitney. So I'll give props out to Heather Whitney. She's an excellent editor. She's definitely somebody you should have edit your work if you're out there looking for that.
Writers, take note.
So I would describe The Story Diver as a mix between Little Women and Ready Player One. It's
Okay.
a near future world in which people like to go into virtual spaces and live their lives. They try to spend as much time in there as they can. It's a bit mixed between movie making in Hollywood and the computer gaming industry. So those 2
Okay.
forces have paired up. And one of the things that they found was that it helps to drive the story by having somebody in there who's a good actor or actress who can play the game well. Somebody who can be kind of like a lead and drive the story. So this character that I've developed, her name is Julia. She is a story diver. She dives into these virtual worlds and gives them deeper plot meaning of it. The problem is she's a young woman, and she's
Mhm.
got these 3 different virtual worlds she's deeply immersed in, and she doesn't really she's having severe identity issues because she's not spending enough time in the real world, doesn't even care about the real world enough. And
Mhm.
while she's in one of these virtual worlds, she angers someone to the extent that they're going to come after her and her friends, and they
Oh
need to
wow.
stay a step ahead of this guy who's murderous, neo-Nazi kind of guy.
He's a scoundrel.
Yeah. And so they're trying to stay a step ahead of him and keep safe from him. While she's also trying to find herself and her own identity outside. She's starting to realize the more she interacts with her friends and with the real world that this virtual worlds that she cares about are important. She also has a love interest in one of the virtual worlds, so there's a problem there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I actually I dig that plot line for one, and for
Thanks.
two, it sounds like something that's just ripped out of the real world, because as games and gaming becomes more immersive, you do have people who spend more and more time online. So that actually sounds pretty awesome, man. I can't wait to hear about the finished product for sure.
I'm really excited about it because those virtual worlds are also pretty exciting in and of themselves. One of them, she's a pirate queen. Whose focus is on raiding slave ships and freeing people from that and bringing them to new colonies and just creating a whole virtual world out of that. She's also a spy in medieval Mali, Timbuktu.
Okay.
So she's a spy there, and then there's a whole plot line there. And then there's another one, a third one, where she is a Nazi hunter. She's wheelchair bound, but she's also an expert archer. And
Nice.
That's where that connection comes in. And
right on.
So she's she's got a lot of personalities, a lot of different identities. So
yeah, I mean that's what games allow you to do, though. Again, when they become immersive, you become a part of whatever game you're playing or whatever character you're portraying. So that sounds pretty awesome, man. I myself can't wait to read it. Is there a target for the release date, or are you kind of doing the George R.R. Martin and just taking the time? When it's done, it's done?
Well, the editor is kind of, and I'm not saying she's holding things up, but it's at the editor's pace right now. So she's working through, because she's works full time and has other things she does. She's averaging out at one chapter every 2 weeks, which is something I'm comfortable with. So when that's finished, then she and I will sit down and we'll talk about the full rewrite process. I'm going to have to do a full rewrite. I expect that'll probably take me 4 or 5 months. I'm hoping to finish by the end of the year, and I'm hoping to start looking for an agent at that time.
Right on.
And, if you have time, I'll tell you about my last book.
Yeah, man. We got as much time as you need.
All right. Well, really quickly, I'll tell you about Lost in a Cold Clime. Lost in a Cold Clime is Lost in a Cold Clime is a alternative history world that turns the idea of European colonization upside down. The Europeans didn't colonize. Europeans were mostly, I won't say that there were a number of factors that impacted Europe, but they never became a colonizing force. In fact, they themselves became colonized. And the big nations of the world are the Mayans and a number of, they're called the Triple Alliance formally, but the Aztecs. Most of the native peoples remain intact and their cultures remain intact. So there's no America. It's called Turtle Island. And then the African kingdoms and nations remained intact, were never colonized. Those are major sources of, those are major superpowers. And then throughout South Asia and Eastern Asia. So my characters, I should say, are exploring. They're just out of high school, and they live in the United Kingdom of Songhai, which is West Africa. It's an area of Mali, Senegal, Guinea, that area. And my main character is going to Europe to hike. He's also doing a humanitarian mission. And it's not really a mission, but more. So he's a very devout Muslim, and one of his concerns is the living conditions of the peoples of Europe and how they manage and how they get along. And so he goes there to kind of with the goal of helping the people. But he learns a lot along the way about how people don't necessarily want help, And it's actually, I'm reversing a lot of tropes here is the plan. I'm basically
Right on.
reversing, it's like, oh, poor Africa, we have to go and help them. And
Mhm.
Africans are very often like, what are you doing here? We don't
Why are
need your
you
help.
here?
You
Right.
brought all these t-shirts and now my t-shirt making business is destroyed. Thank you very much.
Exactly. Right.
And his girlfriend Layla is going, oh, his name's Kareem. And Kareem and
Okay.
his buddy Scott. So Kareem and Scott are hiking across Europa, which
Mhm.
is the name that the Muslims would have given Europe.
Oh.
And then Layla goes to Turtle Island. She goes to Manhattan, which
Mhm.
is and so she sees in those different cultures, and she's actually a sociologist. So she's actually exploring that, and she's living with a family there. But a crisis comes up because the hikers in Europe get lost, and they get lost in a war zone.
Okay.
So that's the game plan right now.
It's another exciting adventure. It sounds like. Where do you draw your inspiration for your writing from?
Um, Often I look at real world events and try to see where they might go. Like a short story that I was selling on Amazon called "The Siege of Malia" was about a group of Senegalese young men who tried to enter Europe, and they cross the overland route, and they go to Malia, which is a what is it called? It's an enclave, basically, of Spain,
Okay.
on in what should be Morocco. So
Mhm.
they go there, and it's about their adventure and their travel. So it's a short story, and so I took that basically from reading about similar incidents that were taking place with migrants trying to get into Europe for a better life, and basically being, brutalized not only along the way, but even at their destinations, and even those who made it to Europe, being brutalized and misused. So I wanted to write something along those lines because I think those are experiences that a lot of people don't know or care about. And I feel like being from Flint, like people like I haven't experienced tons of hardship from living in Flint. I haven't, but
Mhm.
I've seen a lot of hardship. I've seen a lot of people in difficult situations, and I've been poor there too, but not really
Yeah.
poor. I always had somebody who could bail me out if I needed it.
Right. Yeah.
So
It's a
I
strong
feel
knit community all the way around.
right, exactly. And I just I took that with me wherever I went. Is I think looking at other cultures and other places, you need to look with compassion. You need to try to look with empathy, and you need to try to look with local eyes, not a tourist eyes. Which
Right.
is kind of difficult. But if you're not getting the view that the local people see, like there was a book I read actually. I read a lot of books, but there was
I
one
would
book I
imagine
read.
so.
There was one book I read on Africa that I really loved. It was called Africa, the Bright Continent. It was about
Okay.
solutions that local people come up with for local problems.
Mhm.
No outsiders, no outside help. Just this is how we do this, and that's just how it works. So.
Right on. Right on. Shawn, I tremendously appreciate you being on, man. Thank you so very much for the conversation.
Yeah.
Feel free to plug any kind of social media you have or any projects or charities or anything like that you want to plug.
Well, it's been a really, thank you for letting me just completely, talk your ear off. I've really enjoyed it.
It's always a pleasure, man.
You can find me on IrishBoy51 on Twitter.
Okay.
And then I have my own Facebook page, Shawn D. Humphrey, for that project. I'm also developing a computer game and a board game, but I don't want to talk about those because they're so far down the line, I don't know when that's going to happen. So, but I am working on a lot of different things at once. So
Awesome, man.
keep
Awesome.
busy.
So everybody make sure that you keep up with Shawn, support his books, support the novels, and once he's ready to launch the computer game, support that too. Shawn, I appreciate you being on, brother. You stay healthy and stay safe, all right?
I'll do my best. You likewise. Thank you very much,
Thank
Rob.
you. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Take care, man.